I dreamt of darkness. Not night. Night is silence, stars, peace. This was darkness, alive, hungry. It crept from the edge of the world, from beyond the wall, from lands where no man has ever walked and returned. First I heard the wind, a wind that no wall could stop. It passed through stone, through steel, through bone. Trees split in half like dry branches in a fist. Rivers froze mid-current, not slowly, all at once, as if the water itself refused to flow. And then I saw them. An army. But not an army of the living. They marched in silence. Thousands, tens of thousands, from horizon to horizon. Dead eyes, dead faces. Men who were once men. Children who were once children. They did not stop. They did not rest. And behind them, something else. Something vast, something that has no name in any human tongue. A cold that does not simply kill, it takes. It takes and makes you its own. I saw castles burn. I saw walls fall. I saw lords who had spent their entire lives fighting each other, standing alone in their corners, and dying, one by one, kingdom after kingdom, because each one believed, this is not my war. Let my neighbor deal with it. And then the neighbor was gone. And then there was no one left. I woke drenched in sweat, my heart pounding so loud I could hear it in my throat. Outside the window, dawn, Dragonstone, my home. Salt wind, crashing waves, screaming gulls. I sat on the edge of my bed, and I understood. This was not a dream. This was a warning. My name is Aegon Targaryen, son of Aeron, grandson of Daemon, great-grandson of those who fled Valyria 12 years before it burned. My ancestor Daenys Targaryen, they called her Daenys the Dreamer. She woke screaming in the middle of the night. She was 14. She had seen it. Valyria, the greatest city, the greatest empire the world had ever known, gone. The 14 flames, the volcanoes that had been tamed for thousands of years, erupting, all at once, the earth splitting open, the sea boiling, and everything that generations had built, the palaces, the roads, the libraries, everything, buried under ash, in a single night. Her father, Aenar, believed her, the only one. The other 40 noble families of Valyria, each of them commanding dragons of their own, laughed. A mad girl, a bad dream, too much wine at supper. Aenar gathered his family, loaded the ships, and flew to Dragonstone, a small island off the coast of Westeros, a Valyrian outpost, the middle of nowhere. Everyone thought he had lost his mind. 12 years later, Valyria burned. 40 families, hundreds of dragons, millions of souls. The greatest civilization in history, erased in a single night, exactly as a 14-year-old girl had seen. We were the only ones left, the last family of dragon blood, with 3 dragons on a rock in the middle of the sea. For 100 years we sat there, 100 years. While Ethos drowned in blood, we watched from our island. Mine was to the west. I felt it, even before the dream. And after the dream, I knew. Let me tell you about my sisters, because without them, without each of them, none of this would have happened. Visenya, the elder, 1 year older than me. If you met her, you would not remember her beauty first. You would remember her eyes, the kind of eyes that make you take a step back. She moved like a fighter, even when she walked through a hall, even when she sat at a table. Her entire body, a weapon, always. She carried Dark Sister, a Valyrian steel blade, thin and fast, forged in old Valyria long before our time. They say it was made for a woman's hand, lighter, narrower than a common sword. But that did not make it weaker. Visenya could open a man from shoulder to hip in a single stroke. She rode Vhagar, not the largest dragon, but the fiercest. When Vhagar roared, the ground trembled beneath your feet. I married Visenya out of duty. Valyrian tradition. The blood must remain pure. She knew it. I knew it. We never pretended there was love between us. What we had was something else. Respect. Iron, cold respect. She was my sword, my shield, my most ruthless advisor. When everyone around me told me what I wanted to hear, Visenya told me the truth. Always. Even when the truth cut deep. And then, there was Rhaenys. Rhaenys, the younger. If Visenya was the sword, Rhaenys was the flame. Not the kind that burns, the kind that warms. She laughed and the room grew brighter. She walked into a hall, and lords who moments before were ready to tear each other apart fell silent. She rode Meraxes, enormous, silver, with eyes like molten gold. And when Rhaenys was in the sky, she yielded to no one. I married Rhaenys because I wanted to, because I could not do otherwise. Rhaenys gave me a son, Aeneas, my firstborn. Visenya ruled with iron, Rhaenys ruled with heart, and I stood between them, trying to hold it all together. And there was Orys, Orys Baratheon, officially my most loyal bannerman, my closest friend, my half-brother, though no one ever said it aloud. Orys was the only person in front of whom I was not a king, not a conqueror, not the Lord of Dragonstone. I was just Aegon, a man who did not always know what to do, a man who doubted, a man who was, sometimes, afraid. When I told Orys about the dream, he did not question it. He did not hesitate. He looked at me and said, "What needs to be done?" That is what a true brother is. After the dream, I could not rest. Days, weeks. I understood what I had seen, but I did not understand what to do with it. Unite Westeros? 7 kingdoms that had been slaughtering each other for hundreds of years. I was the lord of an island. I had 1,500 soldiers. Yes, I had 3 dragons, but dragons are not everything. You can burn a castle. You cannot burn loyalty. You cannot burn an idea. And so I did one thing that defined everything that followed. I commissioned a table, the painted table, 50 feet long, 25 feet wide, carved from a single piece of wood. On its surface, a map. All of Westeros. Every bay, every river, every mountain range, every castle. But no borders, no lines between kingdoms. Because in my eyes, there were no borders. Not anymore. I sat at that table every night, alone, by candlelight, and I studied every house, every lord, who owed blood to whom, who owed debts to whom, who hated whom. I traveled to Westeros in secret, walked through towns, sat in taverns, listened. I watched these people, their lives, their fears, because I knew one thing. Men fear dragons, but fear does not build kingdoms. Fear builds rebellions. I needed more than victory. I needed to convince. And then, Argilac made the decision for me. Argilac Durrandon, king of the Stormlands. They called him Argilac the Arrogant, and he wore that name like a crown. An old warrior, a fearsome lord, the last of the great line of Storm Kings. Argilac offered me an alliance, his daughter as my bride. I offered a countermove. Let her marry Orys, my best man. A worthy match. Argilac, was furious. A bastard? Give a princess to a bastard? He seized my envoy, cut off both his hands, placed them in a box, and sent them to Dragonstone. When I opened that box, I needed no more reasons. I gathered everyone: Visenya, Rhaenys, Orys, my bannermen. We stood around the painted table, and I showed them the map without borders. I said, I am no longer the Lord of Dragonstone. From this day, there will be one king in Westeros. And I sent ravens to every ruler, every single one. The same message: bend the knee, and you keep everything. Your lands, your titles, your customs. I have not come to destroy. I have come to unite. Refuse, and I will come on Dragonback. Orys buckled his sword. Visenya donned her armor. Rhaenys wove a silver ribbon through her hair. She always did that before battle. Balerion spread his wings. Vhagar roared. Meraxes lifted her head toward the sky. 1,500 men, 3 dragons, against an entire continent. We landed. And in that moment, standing in the mud, salt wind against my face, I looked west. Beyond the hills lay a world. 7 kingdoms, 7 kings, hundreds of lords, millions of souls, and not one of them knew what was coming. They thought I was just another fool from an island, hungry for land. They would learn. All of them. Visenya turned to me. She drew a crown, a simple circlet of Valyrian steel set with rubies, and placed it on my head. Right there, in the mud, on the shore. Aegon, first of his name, king of all Westeros, shield of his people, the crown.
After the landing, I split my forces. Rhaenys moved south, taking surrenders. Visenya moved north. The first houses fell quickly. Rosby, Stokeworth. It was enough for them to see the dragons. Darklyn of Duskendale and Mooten of Maidenpool tried to unite, gathered 3,000 men, and marched against us. Orys met them on the ground. I struck from above on Balerion. Both lords died. Their heirs surrendered the same day. But that was a warm-up. Small houses, small armies. The real war was ahead. Harrenhal. You need to understand Harren to understand what happened next. He was Ironborn. His grandfather, Harrenhal, had conquered the Riverlands, a vast stretch of Westeros, the entire center of the continent. Rivers, fields, castles, all belonged to the Ironborn. But Harren wanted more. He wanted to build a castle the world had never seen. Harrenhal. 40 years he built it. 40. Thousands of people were dragged from across the Riverlands. Peasants, masons, carpenters. They were not asked. They were taken. Entire villages emptied. Sacred groves were cut down. Weirwoods, heart trees, trees the first men held holy. Harren ordered them felled. He did not care about other men's gods. People died by the thousands, on the construction, from hunger, from disease. Every house in the Riverlands despised him. Tully, Blackwood, Bracken, Mallister, all of them. But Harren had an army, a fleet, an iron grip, and so they stayed silent. And on the 40th year, the castle was finished. 5 towers, each taller than any fortress in Westeros, walls so thick you could ride a wagon across them, gates of forged steel. Harrenhal could house an entire army. 1,000,000 men could have stormed those walls, and failed. Harren stood atop his tallest tower, looked down upon his creation, and believed himself invincible. That same day, I landed on the Blackwater shore. 40 years of building, and he would not enjoy a single peaceful day. I moved toward the God's Eye, a great lake in the heart of the Riverlands, vast, dark, with the Isle of Faces at its center. Harrenhal stood on the southern shore. On the way, Harren's sons let me know this would not be easy. First, the Battle of the Reeds. My men clashed with Harren's vanguard. We won, but we lost men. And then came what I did not expect: the Wailing Willows. Night. My camp on the southern shore of the lake. Silence. And then, screams. 2 of Harren's sons had crossed the lake in longboats, oars wrapped in cloth so there would be no sound, and struck our rear. It was a good ambush, I will not deny that. We lost many men that night. Harren's sons were vicious, but they knew how to fight. Ironborn are born with an axe in hand. We held. We survived. But I remembered that night. I remembered these people would not break easily. And then, I stood before Harrenhal. I had seen many castles, traveled Westeros, studied every fortress on maps and through stories. But when you stand before Harrenhal, you feel small. The towers disappear into the clouds. I am not exaggerating, literally into the clouds. The walls, black, smooth, endless. The entire castle presses down on you. It was built so that you would feel your own insignificance. And somewhere up there stood Harren, with his sons, with his army. Behind walls he had spent his entire life building. I sent him terms, the same I had offered everyone. Bend the knee, keep everything. Titles, lands, your life. Harren refused. I offered again. This time, I added, come out, and I will grant you the Riverlands. Everything you hold remains yours. Simply acknowledge me as king. Harren refused again. Then I rode to the walls myself, on horseback, no dragon. I wanted him to see me, a man, not a monster on a winged beast. A man, giving him one last chance. Harren stood on the wall. I could see him, massive, gray, an iron crown on his head. Behind him, 4 sons, all of them armored, all of them ready. I said, you can end this now. Come out and bend the knee, and you will live. Your sons will live. Your house will continue. I have not come to kill. I have come to unite. Harren looked down at me. From that height, I must have seemed like an ant to him. And he answered, my walls are thick. My gates are steel. Stone does not burn. I was silent for a moment, and I said one sentence. When the sun sets, your line will end with it. I turned my horse, and I rode away. Harren had time, the whole day. He could have come out. He could have sent his sons. He could have negotiated. He did not. Pride. the kind of pride that kills. He gathered his men, locked the gates, put every soldier on the walls, archers, swordsmen, everything he had. Harrenhal prepared for a siege that he believed would last years. He looked at my small army at the base of his walls, and he must have laughed. What would I do? Stand there and wait until my food ran out? The sun began to set. I climbed onto Balerion. I rose above Harrenhal at sunset. The last light of day, red, crimson, like blood. Below me, a castle that took 40 years to build. Thousands of lives poured into those walls. Balerion drew breath and exhaled. Black flame struck the tallest tower, the one where Harren hid, the Tower of the King's Pyre. That is what they would call it later. The stone glowed red, then white, then began to flow. Steel gates bent and twisted. Wooden beams inside ignited in an instant. The entire castle became a furnace. I heard the screams, even from that height, even through the roar of Balerion. Harren and all 4 of his sons burned alive. In the hall he had built for feasts and celebrations, behind walls he believed were unbreakable, the Iron Crown melted on his head. 40 years of construction, thousands of lives spent. The greatest castle in history. One night, one dragon. In the morning, I descended, rode to what remained. The towers still stood, but they were warped, twisted, blackened, like candles left burning too long. The walls had cracked. Inside, it was still hot. Smoke rose for days. And then, something happened that Harren never foresaw. Something he feared more than dragons. His own subjects came to me. Edmund Tully, Lord of Riverrun. He was the first. The Riverlands had despised the Ironborn for generations. Taxes, brutality, slavery on that cursed construction. And when Harren burned, Tully did not wait. He came to me and bent the knee. I named him Lord Paramount of the Trident, the first in history. House Tully, from minor lords to rulers of the entire Riverlands, in a single night. The rest of the river houses followed. Blackwood, Bracken, Mallister, all of them. Remove a tyrant, and people come to you on their own. Here is what I learned at the walls of Harrenhal. Dragons break walls. But the real victory is when the people who were oppressed see you as a liberator. The Riverlands were not conquered. They were freed.
After Harrenhal, the world changed. Every lord in Westeros saw the smoke over the god's eye. Every lord heard what happened to Harren. The greatest castle in history melted in a single night. 5 towers, twisted like candles. An entire dynasty, ash. Some looked at this and understood. Time to bend the knee. Others gripped their swords tighter. I split my forces. Rhaenys and Orys marched south to the Stormlands. Visenya flew north to the Vale, and I moved west toward the largest army Westeros had ever assembled. But first, the Stormlands. First, Argilac. Argilac Durandon, the Storm King. The same man who cut off my envoy's hands and sent them in a box to Dragonstone. An old warrior, hard, proud beyond reason, the last of the great line of Storm Kings, a dynasty that had ruled for thousands of years. He would not kneel, not to anyone, not ever. Argilac knew I was coming, knew about Harrenhal, knew about the dragons, and still, he chose to fight. He could have locked himself inside Storm's End. The castle sits on a cliff above the sea, nearly impossible to storm. A siege could have lasted years. But Argilac did not hide behind walls. He marched out, into the open field, to meet my army, because he was the Storm King, and Storm Kings do not hide. The battle took place beneath the walls of Storm's End. Rain, wind, thunder, as if the gods themselves came to watch. They would call this battle the Last Storm. Rhaenys flew above on Meraxes. Orys led the infantry on the ground. Argilac struck first. His knights smashed into our center, 3 charges in a row. Heavy cavalry, the finest in Westeros. They broke through our lines, cut us apart. For a moment, it looked like we were losing. Then Rhaenys turned Meraxes. Golden flame crashed down on Argilac's personal guard. Men burned. Horses screamed. The Storm King's formation collapsed. Argilac did not run. He was knocked from his horse, but he stood, sword in hand, alone, in the middle of a field covered with the dead. An old man, in mud, in blood, still fighting. Orys stepped forward, my closest friend, my brother, against the last Storm King. Orys offered him surrender. Argilac cursed him and attacked. Orys killed him in single combat, 1-on-1. The Storm King was dead. But the war was not over. Argila Durrandon, Argilac's daughter, sealed the gates of Storm's End, declared herself Storm Queen, raised the banners, the crowned stag on gold, said, "We will not surrender." Her garrison thought otherwise. They had seen what happened to their king, seen the dragons, understood they would burn next. The soldiers of Storm's End seized Argila, bound her, and brought her to the gates, handed her to Orys. Orys looked at her, took off his cloak, draped it over her shoulders, untied her bonds. Then he took her as his wife, not as a trophy, as an equal. He took the Durrandon sigil, the crowned stag, took their words, "Ours is the fury," became the first Baratheon, Lord of the Stormlands. I named him Hand of the King, the first in history. That was Orys, my brother, a man who knew how to win and how to respect the defeated. While Orys took the Stormlands, a storm was gathering in the west, a real one. 2 kings united against me. Mern, the 9th Gardener, King of the Reach, the richest kingdom in Westeros. Fertile lands, vast population, endless resources. The Gardeners had ruled for thousands of years. Loren Lannister, King of the Rock. Casterly Rock, gold, power, pride. The Lannisters believed themselves above everyone. Together they assembled an army, 55,000 men, the largest army in the history of Westeros, larger than Harren's, larger than Argilac's, larger than everything I had faced, combined. 55,000 against my 10, 5-1. On paper, this was not a war. This was an execution. We met on the plains near the Blackwater. Open field. 55,000 soldiers stood before us, the largest army Westeros had ever seen. From one edge of the horizon to the other, the ground shook beneath their boots. My army looked small next to theirs. 10,000. Most of them joined along the way. Former enemies turned allies. They looked at the horde of Gardener and Lannister, and many of them probably thought they'd come to die. Mern Gardener sent his cavalry charging. Heavy horse, the finest in the world. They hit our center, broke through. My men fell. And then, for the first time in history, all 3 dragons took to the field at once. Me on Balerion, Visenya on Vhagar, Rhaenys on Meraxes. We struck the center of the enemy army, where it was thickest, where men stood shoulder to shoulder, so tight they could not turn. Black flame, green flame, golden flame. 3 streams of fire at once, from above. The field caught fire. The ground became a furnace. Men in armor cooked alive. Those who did not burn choked on smoke. The formation collapsed. 55,000 became a panicked mob. 5,000 burned. 10,000 more wounded. Mern Gardner died. With him, all his sons. Every heir. Every last one. The Gardner dynasty, thousands of years of history, ended on that field, in a single day. Loren Lannister was smarter. He saw what was happening, saw the Gardners burn, and he did what smart men do. He survived, fled the field, and then bent the knee. I let him keep Casterly Rock, named him Warden of the West, because I did not come to destroy houses. I came to unite. And to the south, to Highgarden, I sent word. The Tyrell stewards, servants of the Gardners, opened the gates and surrendered the castle. I named them Lords Paramount of the Reach, from servants to lords, in one day. News of the Field of Fire reached the north faster than any raven. Torrhen Stark, the king in the north, winter in his blood, a wolf on his banner. 30,000 Northmen, hardened, tough, used to cold and pain. Torrhen led his army south, through the neck, past the Twins, to the Trident. He came to fight. His bastard brother, Brandon Snow, offered a plan. Sneak into the camp at night, kill the dragons in their sleep. 3 men with poisoned arrows. A mad plan, but Starks always had courage that bordered on madness. Torrhen listened, thought, then walked to the banks of the Trident and saw. My army stood on the other side, but it was not the army that mattered. It was what stood behind it. 3 dragons, Balerion, Vhagar, Meraxes, and behind me, what remained of 55,000. Smoke, ash, the charred banners of the Gardners. Torrhen stood on the riverbank and looked, for a long time. He could fight. 30,000 Northmen, that is a force. They would not run, they would stand to the last man, every one of them, and every one of them would burn. Torrhen sent 3 maesters across the river. Negotiations lasted 2 days. His brother Brandon Snow also crossed, alone, to see the dragons up close. They say, when he came back, he did not say a word. On the 3rd day, Torrhen Stark crossed the Trident, removed his crown, laid it at my feet, and bent the knee. His people called him Torrhen who knelt, as if it was something shameful. I call him something else. Torrhen, who saved his people. He looked at the Field of Fire and decided his people would not burn, that 30,000 families would get their fathers and sons back. That is not weakness, that is wisdom, the kind that comes hardest of all. I named him Lord of Winterfell and Warden of the North. The Starks would rule the North, as they had for thousands of years before me. Visenya took the Vale, without blood. She flew Vhagar straight to the Eyrie, an impregnable castle on top of a mountain, a place no army could reach. For 1,000 years the Arryn sat there, behind the bloody gate, untouchable. Visenya simply flew over all of it, landed in the courtyard. Shara Arryn, the Queen Regent, came out to meet her, with her young son by the hand. The boy was 6 years old, Ronal Arryn. Know what the boy did? He was not afraid. He looked at Vhagar and asked for a ride. Visenya looked at Shara. Shara looked at the dragon, at her son, at the sky, and surrendered. Visenya put the boy on Vhagar and flew him over the Vale. Ronald laughed, and his mother stood below and watched her kingdom slip away. No blood, no fire. One flight, and the Vale was mine. That left Oldtown, the largest city in Westeros, the seat of the Faith of the Seven, the citadel of the Maesters. If Oldtown said no, the Faith would rise against me. Every septon, every sept, every believer from Dawn to the Wall, against a foreigner with 2 sister wives. The High Septon locked himself in the Starry Sept, prayed for 7 days and 7 nights, bread and water. On the 7th day, he emerged and said, the crone had shown him a vision. If Oldtown takes up arms, the city burns. Lord Hightower opened the gates. I entered Oldtown without a fight. The High Septon anointed me, crowned me, named me Aegon, first of his name, King of the Andals, the Rhoynar, and the First Men, Lord of the 7 Kingdoms, Protector of the Realm. 6 kingdoms, in 2 years, 3 dragons, 1,500 men at the start, and an entire continent at the end.
I did not rule from Oldtown, did not return to Dragonstone. I chose the place where it all began, 3 hills by the Blackwater, the Aegon Fort, a wooden fort in the mud that would one day become King's Landing. And I built a throne. I took swords, 1,000 swords, from those who surrendered, from those who fell, from those who knelt, and I piled them together, all of them. Then Balerion exhaled. Black flame melted the steel. Swords bent, flowed, twisted into each other. Blades jutting out in every direction. Sharp, dangerous. The Iron Throne. Crooked, ugly, uncomfortable. They say it cut those who sat on it. If you relaxed, a blade would bite your hand. If you leaned back, it sliced your spine. Exactly as it should be. A throne should not be comfortable. The one who rules should never forget what it cost. Every sword on that throne is someone's war, someone's death, someone's choice to surrender or to burn. I sat on that throne, cold metal, sharp edges, and I knew I would sit here until the end. 6 kingdoms under one crown. 1, Dawn, never submitted, but that is another story. I united Westeros, not because I wanted power, not because I enjoyed watching people burn. I did it because one night I had a dream, and in that dream, a divided world was destroyed. I created the Kingsguard, the small council, the office of Hand of the King, laws that forbade lords from warring without the crown's permission. I rode across the kingdom, every corner, with 6 maesters who taught me the customs of each region. Because conquering is easy. Holding it together, that takes everything. I ruled for 37 years, and in all that time, I never forgot that dream. The darkness from the north, the army of the dead, the cold that cracks the trees. It will come. Not in my time, but it will come. And when it does, Westeros must stand as one, under one banner, under one crown. For this, I burned Harrenhal. For this, I unleashed 3 dragons on the field of fire. For this, I sit on a throne made of other men's swords, not for power, for what is coming.